Hey everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski here, taking a look at one of the feature races at Belmont Park on Saturday. It is race 10, the Grade 1 Belmont Derby Invitational, which is the DRF Saturday Race of the Day. Remember that you can get a DRF Saturday Race of the Day access by scanning the QR code on your mobile device, which gives you free access to Formulator PPs for this race, the Grade 1 Belmont Derby. And Craig, we've got a field of 11 signed on, and this is a pretty interesting race to handicap. Just a couple runners from Europe, Silver, not who we're more familiar with. He's run the U.S. a couple of times, as well as an intriguing outsider and outside in the starting gate, the number 11, the Foxes, who comes over with some credentials. But we've also talked about the fact that this is a pretty strong crop of American three-year-old turf horses. So very interesting to see how this all shakes out.
Yeah, this is an interesting matchup. I'm looking forward to it. We've talked about the three-year-old crop most of the year on our various podcasts that we do, and we've already seen Silver not come over and not be able to get the job done as a three-year-old, though he is a contender in this spot for sure.
Yeah, had trouble making a morning line for this race. I ended up targeting the Foxes as the slight morning line favorite at 7-2, but I could see horses like Websinger, Far Bridge, Kalick taking money. Going to be interested to see how this race is bet in addition to how it plays out on the racetrack. And to get some clue as to how this race might be run, let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector for this Belmont Derby. And there is a little bit of speed in here, Craig. I think a couple of runners that would have intentions on going forward towards the front end, those being two horses drawn right alongside each other in the starting gate, the number 7 Wizard of Westwood coming in from California, and the number 8 Kalick, who has won in gate-to-wire fashion in his last couple of starts. I guess we'll see which one goes to the front. I would imagine, though, that Irad Ortiz and Chad Brown would be content to stalk Wizard of Westwood with Kalick if that one's intent on the lead.
I think that would be the case. I agree with the pace projector in this spot. Kalick has shown the ability to come from off the pace, and Wizard of Westwood drawn to the inside maybe has a little more natural early speed anyway, but I still think Irad would probably be happy with a trip sitting just off that one's flank.
Yeah, we're not characterizing this pace scenario in any way with regard to fast or slow fractions. In a large field, though, trips are going to be important. Well, let's discuss every runner in this field because it is that competitive. So we'll go through it in post-position order, beginning with the number 1, Mendelssohn's March, who is one of the long shots in this field. And Craig, this horse is just going to have to find some improvement if he's going to turn the tables on Web Slinger and some others in this race, because he was really no factor when he stepped up against tough company in the American Turf 2 back. And while he did improve to the second last time in the Audubon behind Web Slinger, it never looked like he was beating that foe.
No, it didn't, but he only lost by 1.25, which is not that tough to make up on turf if Web Slinger was to run into some trouble. The problem is there's some other good horses in here as well to beat in addition to that one. I can envision a case where he gets a good inside trip, and if others run into some trouble, I expect them to run well. I'm just not sure it would be good enough.
The number 2 is Boppy O, and he's one of the more experienced runners in this race, having already made 10 career starts. Here he is winning his last race, causing an upset in the Jersey Derby, going a mile at Monmouth. And Craig, he got some pace to close into this day. I think there's an argument that maybe the runner-up in this race, Talk of the Nation, perhaps ran the better race because he was attending that fast pace that fell apart at the end. But Boppy O did take a real step forward here. I think you just have to determine for yourself where it came from, because his prior form didn't really suggest that kind of performance was within his capabilities. And also, can he do it going 10 furlongs?
For me, the 10 furlongs is a big question. He hasn't been more than a mile in the 16th so far, and he just doesn't scream a horse that wants to run forever to me. I just said that last race kind of fell into his lap on the Timeform US speed figures. He basically ran the same speed figures he's been running in some of his losing efforts. So it's a pretty tall task in front of Boppy O.
With this race coming up so competitive, there are going to be some talented horses in here that maybe can fall through the cracks. And I wonder if the number 3 Cyber Ninja is one of those. Let's take a look at his last race when he broke his maiden at Belmont Park. Now, Distance is going to be no problem for this horse because he broke his maiden going 1 3/8 miles. So he's actually cutting back in distance here. And Greg, I know that the speed figures are a little bit light on this horse, but I really like what I've seen from him. You can see in this replay, this son of Aragate has a big stride on him, a really nice extension to his stride as he comes onto the finish line. He's got a nice finishing kick. And we saw that too back at Keeneland when he was behind a very slow pace and made up a ton of ground to just barely miss that day. I was looking up the raw fractions in GMAX, and they had him coming home his final quarter in just over 22 flat that day. I think this horse has ability, but they're asking quite a bit of him, but maybe it's a sign of confidence that Belmont's running in this spot.
Yeah, it's crazy. That race 2 back where he had the 99 time form US speed figure, you can see just a really big pace upgrade because how slow the pace actually was. He will need to take a step forward, but one thing I would caution people is speed figures going 1.25 miles for horses who have never really done it before. They can change pretty drastically. So maybe the others who had looked to have a big edge on him won't have quite that same edge when they go a longer distance.
One of the main players in this race is the number 4 Web Slinger. And Craig, this horse has just been steadily improving over the past several months for trainer Mark Casse. He showed ability as a 2-year-old, but he's really come to hand this year, winning twice in a row. And he's been doing so without ideal trips. I mean, he was compromised by a wide trip in the Transylvania when he lost, but it's not like he got much better trips in either the American Turf or the Audubon. He was 3 to 4 wide in both of those races, still got the job done with some nice speed figures. He just makes a lot of sense in here.
He does. The speed figures fit, as you say, they weren't earned under ideal circumstances with those wide trips. Even last time, he was heavily bet, obviously, at 3 to 5, but I really like the way he did it, winning pretty easily in the end. And it was a step down in class. Now he moves back up, but he certainly has the numbers to handle it and is a major player here.
The number 5 is Far Bridge, and we'll take a look at him along with a couple of others coming out of the Pennine Ridge, the local prep for this run at Belmont in early June. We'll get to Kalick in a little bit. He's the horse on the lead who eventually wins this race. But check out Far Bridge in those yellow silks with a yellow cap. You could see he's in a little bit of traffic in upper stretch there, and he sort of put himself in that difficult spot because he kind of disengaged around the far turn and lost some position, which caused him to run into traffic. But once he gets clear in the stretch, he is finishing best of all, not able to catch that loose on the lead winner Kalick, but a good runner-up finish here. And Greg, this is a horse that came out running with a big effort in his career debut. He's basically run up to a similar level in all 3 starts since then, so has yet to put forth a bad effort, just a nose and a length shy of being undefeated in 4 career starts. And distance is not supposed to be a problem for this son of English Channel.
No, it shouldn't be. He obviously has a talent. He has the speed figures. I know his former rider got a lot of grief for those races. I personally wonder how much of it is the horse, because he only really seems to do his best running when he gets up along the rail, which seems kind of odd for a horse, but he's shown it in almost all of his races. So I do think there are some question marks in a big field like this. If he wants to be inside, that he could run into some traffic trouble yet again.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about him being a bit of a rail runner, and he's definitely a tricky horse to ride. They're making a rider switch here, but Jose Ortiz does have experience on having ridden him to that allowance victory in his second start. Also coming out of the Pennine Ridge is the number 6 Silver Knot. And Craig, of the top 3 finishers in that race, I was most disappointed in Silver Knot because I thought he got a pretty good trip, all things considered. He saved ground early, and while the pace perhaps did not favor a closer, he had his chance in the stretch. He got to the outside and was still run down by Far Bridge. Just feels like these Charlie Appleby runners have not been quite as scary this year as they have in some past years.
I would agree with that. And, you know, he ran his best speed figure. Of course, we use time form ratings for the foreign races, but that 114 was the best he's done. And I didn't give him a lot of excuses last time. I think the top 2 were better than him that day, and he's got to face those foes in addition to a couple others.
Up next is the number 7 Wizard of Westwood. We'll take a look at his last race in the Cinema Stakes out at Santa Anita. And Craig, I think there's often an inclination to downgrade these California shippers when they come east for a turf stakes like this. But this horse, I think there are some things to like about him. Sure, he wasn't quite as good as Johannes, going a little bit shorter earlier in the season. That was a very talented Timniak teen runner, but feels like this guy has really improved with added distance. I think that's a key factor as he's again going 10 furlongs in this Belmont Derby, because he ran his best race last time, surviving that fast pace in the Cinema, going 1.25 miles. And when you just watch the stretch run of that race, this horse has a lot of size to him, a big stride on him, and he's probably going to the front here. I don't think he's the kind of California horse that you can just dismiss.
No, normally I would be like you and see the California form and not think he'd be competitive. He is a little bit late on the speed figures. The one danger is not danger, but the one asset he has is that early speed. I mean, how many times have we seen a race on the NYRA circuit get one wire to wire in these turf races and everybody gets surprised at the end? But I do expect this guy to be on the lead. He's shown he can handle the distance. So I do think he's a player in here.
And with John Velasquez on board as opposed to Irad on the other speed to his outside Kalik, who we'll talk about next, it feels like Wizard of Westwood might be the one who's ridden with a little more intention from the starting gate. We'll see how that works out. Not that Kalik, whose PPs we're looking at here, can't rate Craig. I mean, he was effective coming from off the pace when he broke his maiden by a nose at Gulfstream with a nice late run, 3 back. Since then, though, he's run the 2 best speed figures by far, leading in the early stages, getting to relax on the front end with favorable pace setups. So you could make the argument that he's a little bit dressed up, but he's definitely taken a big step forward in recent starts.
He's a contender in this spot. I just don't know what kind of price you'd want to accept on a horse who has had basically perfect trips his last 2 times out. I mean, you can see last time he was on a clear lead. He got challenged a little in the middle of the race, was able to repel that horse and just hold on to the wire. He wasn't exactly finishing like a horse who would relish the 10 furlongs coming up. So I think that's a little bit of a question as well. I mean, I think he's a player. I'm just not sure I want to take a shortish price on him.
The number 9 is Mondego, a horse who's making his stakes debut in this spot. Let's take a look at his last race when he was an allowance optional claiming winner at Belmont in early June. And, you know, Craig, like I said with Cyber Ninja, there are some talented horses in this race that are going to go off at big prices. And you could say Mondego is another one of those because he really hasn't done too much wrong in his career. He's now won twice in a row. He was an impressive maiden winner 2 back. And I like the way he was able to alter course and then kick on to get this victory going 1.125 miles. Feels like the distance is not going to be any problem for him, but he does get a class test here.
It is quite a class test, and I would prefer the other one we talked about earlier a little more because this guy's been running basically the same speed figures even in victory. We haven't really seen a big jump forward from him. Maybe it comes here and you're going to get paid for it if you think it's coming, but I think that would be a bit of a stretch.
Another runner taking a big step up in class is the number 10 Redistricting, who is one of the more intriguing runners in this Belmont Derby. This is just the second start of his career. As we're taking a look at his lone prior run in his debut race. The word was out as he got bet down to 2-1 this day, and the hype was justified as he always traveled well and produced this huge kick when they got into the stretch. I mean, you could see he's just mowing this field down once Irad Ortiz asked him to go. And it's not every day, Craig, that you see first-time starters win on the turf by nearly 5 lengths.
No, I was very impressed by this horse. I think we handicapped this race, if I remember, but maybe not. In any case, it was one where he didn't get a lot of pace and made that eye-catching move coming off the turn and just blew him away in the stretch. His speed figure's just a 106. Seems like a horse who would do better with more distance, and just the raw and looking at the raw times, he actually came home that last 16th, I guess it was, in less than 6 seconds. And that's just not something you see all that often, particularly from a first-time starter.
Yeah, this horse definitely has a lot of promise, and he's bred to go longer, not just being by Kingman, but the dam is a full sister to St. Nicholas Abbey, who was a Breeders' Cup Turf winner. So distance not supposed to be a problem. It's just a lot to ask of a horse in the second start of its career. I did look up some stats in DRF Formulator around similar moves for trainer Chan Brown, with 3-year-old second-time starters in graded stakes on the turf over the past 5 years. Chad is over 8, so this hasn't worked out too much in the past, but this is a horse that might be of exceptional quality. We'll see about that. And the final runner that we talk about in this field is the number 11, the Foxes, the European Invader, coming in for trainer Andrew Balding. Let's take a look at his race 2 back, his last victory when he won the Dante Stakes. This is a Group 2 event that is a prep for the Derby that they run at Epsom. And he actually won this race, Craig, one of the key Derby preps. And he did so by closing from towards the back of the pack. You could see this long straightaway at York clearly suited him, as he was covered up early, but got to the inside, or maybe the outside. It's hard to tell on these straightaway courses in the stretch. Does hang to the right a little bit at the end, but he's able to hold off those foes on the way to the wire. Got a strong time form rating for this race. Now, he regressed a little bit last time in the Derby, but maybe 1.5 miles is just a little far for him. I think turning back the 10 furlongs is really going to suit the Foxes.
One of the things I do with these shippers is I always give a full reading of the time form comments. And that's the thing they mentioned, that it was probably just too long for him. And it's not like he was embarrassed in that race. He was beaten by some very, very good horses who would probably be heavy favorites if they were in this spot. So I certainly feel this horse is a contender. I do wonder, I mean, it's just such a different course than what he's been running on, if he's somebody you really want to take a short price on. And I agree with your morning line. I think he's going to be the favorite.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how they bet it. He also could have to deal with some hot temperatures in the New York City area this weekend, which I know his connections have expressed some concern about. Let's take a look at our picks for this Belmont Derby. And Craig, we're both going for horses that are coming off maiden victories, but it is that kind of race where it feels like there's just a lot of depth of talent, and you want to try to uncover those horses that might be moving ahead at the right time. The horse that you put on top redistricting could certainly be one of those, because he was so impressive in his debut.
Yeah, I kind of ignored your formulator stat. I just really liked what I saw from this horse. And like you, it's a race where I just don't want to default to the favorites who are going to take the money, because it feels like a race where any of 8, 7, 8, even 9 horses wouldn't shock me if they were to win this race. So I went looking for a little bit of a newcomer and a horse who might offer some value.
Yeah, as you can see, I think Craig and I both agree that the number 4 Web Slinger is probably the horse to beat in this race. And of the shorter prices, we both have him second, but I'm going to reach a little bit with the number 3 Cyber Ninja. I talked about his merits before, how I think he's moving in the right direction. We'll appreciate the distance. And I really like the draw for this horse being down towards the inside. The rails are going to be down this weekend on the inner turf course at Belmont. I think you want to save ground on these courses, and just think this is a horse that has a lot of talent that might not be uncovered yet. It'll be a big price in this race. So it's the number 3 Cyber Ninja for me, and the number 10 redistricting for Craig in the Belmont Derby race 10 on Saturday at Belmont Park.